Today our team is going to present topic leadership as a cultural construct and global leadership. Before starting, I'm gonna to give the information about what I will cover under this topic. I will tell the information about what is joint venture, what are the reasons of joint venture, does the project on which currently our team is doing work suits with joint venture. The very first is what is joint venture? Joint venture is a strategic approach that can be used in decision making in highly competitive markets. On the other words, joint venture is an voluntary agreements between two or more businesses or two or more entities uh, on the temporary or permanent basis that can be used to exchange the information about new products, new services, or new innovative technologies. Third, now I want to differentiate what is joint venture company and what is joint venture project. Joint venture company is a company that can be formed with the help of two or more businesses. And joint venture project is a project that is the collaboration of two or more businesses or two more or more entities to achieve a common goals and responsibilities. Now, what are the reasons of joint venture? The reasons of joint venture is that firstly, in order to become a successful global market player, there is a need of joint venture because it is helpful to compete on the global markets. The second, in order to assess new global or domestic markets, there is the need of joint venture. Here I would like to include the example. Joint venture is a way that is used to capture the attentions of the customer in a large volume because it has an ability to provide the services, to provide the good products, to provide the innovative techniques to the customer. For instance, in Pakistan, Banjana and Satrangi are the two joint venture brands that are providing the elegant clothing to their end users. Thirdly, the need of joint venture is that in order to mitigate with the major risks or uncertainties like cash flows, unskillful labors, lack of resources can be reduced with the help of joint venture. Now, does the project on which our team is doing work suit joint venture or not? Yes, definitely this project with joint suit with joint venture because this international joint venture product project involves two countries that are on two different locations and that have two different cultural backgrounds. Thank you. And the next part will be presented by my fellow one.
To understand the Australian and Japanese joint venture, it is important that we understand the cultures of these two countries first. To talk about the Australian culture, we can break it down into the Australian people culture and the Australian leadership culture. The people culture can, as the data taken from the Globe project here, shows that the society puts a very high emphasis on performance orientation, assertiveness, being future oriented compared to a lot of other factors amongst the other countries. Major takeaways from the cultural understanding is that Australia comprises of a society that can be labeled as Anglo culture. The society has dominant beliefs in being performance oriented, having collectivism, gender egalitarianism, lower impact of power distance, and uncertainty avoidance. Even though that the society believes in collectivism, the belief in in-group collectivism, is relatively very low compared to the different cities. Australian leadership culture. The Australian leadership culture compared to the average scores that have been comprised of the other countries in the Globe Project, as taken from the Globe Project as source, shows that they believe a leader should be charismatic, should be team oriented, have a participative view, should have a human side, and at the same time should have a lower self protective attitude and be autonomous in taking their decisions. The Australian leaders have a dominant belief in having very low power distance. The successful leadership, as shown in the globe data, is characterized by a leader being charismatic, having having the courage to take the decisions themselves, being high on morale, and at the same time not be a person who just protects themselves when a time of crisis arises. Taking a look at the Japanese culture, the Japanese people culture. The Japanese people culture, this is the data from the Globe project again. Here, as we see, it shows the difference between how it stands compared to the other countries. What we majorly see that Japan can be called as a society which has Confucian Asia culture. It's a society that has dominant beliefs in being performance oriented, having humane values, believing in institutional collectivism, and having a lower power distance again. The society, even though it believes in institutional collectivism, future orientation, and having and has a lower gender egalitarianism value. The leadership culture in Japan. This is the same data source again taken from the Globe project. What we see here is that Japanese leaders believe in having lower power distance. They believe the leader being charismatic, team oriented, participative, and humane. The values from the Globe project indicate that the beliefs in the contributing factors of the leadership scores are not as high as of the scores of the Australian leadership. What will be the major challenges for this joint venture? For this joint venture to work, even though the beliefs to have lower power distance, there is a significant difference in the way a leader would make decisions and the autonomism of the leader, the ability of the leader to make decisions on their own. The major challenge for this joint venture would be to create more participative, autonomous, and team-oriented culture for the project teams, which would be a multicultural and global team.
By now, I guess you have already known about the various cultural practices, leadership approach, and problem that Australia Japan joint venture might face regarding its diverse workforce. So I will be speaking on why we think, despite of these factors, this project might have slightest possibilities for success. For any business project to succeed, there can be various determining factors for the project outcomes. Similarities regarding the cultural practices and leadership preference among these two countries. According to a Globe project, Australia has slightly high power distance practices. On the other hand, Japan practices slightly high in institutional collectivism and in-group collectivism. Similarly, from leadership visualization of a Globe project, self-protective leadership are slightly discouraged in Australia, while such leadership has no impact in Japan. You can see more information from the given table. From the globe studies of 62 countries, we get to know that Australia and Japan have six similar cultural practices which are performance orientation, future orientation, human orientation, gender egalitarianism, power distance, uncertainty avoidance. While these two countries shares three preferences that are team oriented, human oriented, and autonomous. From the analysis of Australia and Japan, with regards to globe studies of 62 countries, uh, we found some of the benefit that this Australia-Japan joint venture management can have. So first one is management can imply rules easily as both countries has scored high in power distance dimension. Who scored high in this dimension has a culture that seek to respect and tolerate more for concentrated power. Hence, it will be easier for management to imply fixed rules in its organization while managing. Second one is since Japan has a unique high culture of in-group and institutional collectivism, this encourages loyalty of staffs, or this kind of cultures are loyal to the group, to the familiar group or organization. This can create a habit to be loyal and to have pride, even if it undermines the pursuit of self or individual goals. So third one is Australian high team oriented and participative leadership preference. Since Australia has scored slightly high in team oriented and participative leadership dimension, this means that they can force management. They accept leadership that are visionary, inspirational, self-sacrificial, and tend to follow strong administrative management. Hence, this will create strong management in the joint venture. So last one is, since both countries considered autonomous leadership ineffective, this will vitalize dependency among each other. Autonomous leadership uh, tends to work in a secret way, not open to others. Hence, such culture will encourage more communication, more openness towards each other. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yixing. This is my topic, solutions and recommendations. Recommendations for the joint venture. To avoid problems in a joint venture, leaders should do three things in here. The first one is rigorously map culture. Leaders should use the selected tools to diagnose processes, suggestions, and policies that are mitigating the difference between the organizations and see what will shape culture in the new joint venture, as it will influence decision-making. Two is embed the right culture by suggesting the leadership team differently as per each partner's culture. Three is policy alignment. To create a sense of purpose and set the tone of the joint venture, policy alignment can be utilized. For example, Australia, parental leave is calculated as 18 weeks or 90 payable days, while in Japan it's in two terms, that is 6 weeks prior and 8 weeks after giving birth. Next, we to go to the recommendation on the cultural difference. Leaders may be forced to change their leadership behavior to conform to the cultural realities faced, encouraging team-oriented leadership, trains global managers to become better leaders, execute it through the pyramid model of global leadership. Pyramid model of global leadership entails system scale, which incorporate community stakeholder organizing, boundary spanning, ethical and changing scale, global management scale, the encompasses developing meaningful communication, multicultural teaming and trust-building scales. Multicultural competence entails scale based on cosmopolitanism and cognitive complexity. Threshold traits encompasses developing core human values of integrity, resilience, inquisitiveness, and humility. Fundamental knowledge of global business leader gains on understanding of the technological, social, and economic as, as, aspects of the new environments. Recommendations for the success of cultural difference. Training on global citizenship. The above entities know the culture of employees, training classes on the different cultural practice. Culture fit. Rather than letting one culture or one country dominate, the two should embrace their difference. Before implementing the joint venture, leaders should grasp the difference between the two sides and have a detailed plan on how to address problems that would emerge due to cultural difference. Conclusion for the project. Joint venture success is closely related to the interaction of the different cultures and leadership strategies. One ought to understand the cultural difference, identify the problems related to cultural difference, and plan to solutions recommendations in case of problems arising from the cultural interactions. The above project has described a joint venture identified a cultural difference between Japan and the Australian people, analyzing the joint venture problems based on cultural difference. Observed actions lead the project success, and often the solutions and recommendations to the identified problems. Last one is our reference. Thank you for listening.